They picked the wrong country. Just hours after a hypersonic missile struck Ben Gurion Airport, the skies over Yemen exploded in fire. American F-18s and Israeli F-35s unleashed precision strikes that leveled Houthi launch sites, silenced radar towers, and collapsed underground command tunnels. What began as a bold attack ended in brutal devastation. This wasn't just retaliation. It was a warning to every enemy watching. Strike one of us, and you answer to both. Because on May 4th, 2025, the United States didn't just respond. It reminded the world exactly why it's feared, showing strong deterrence against Iran, Russia, and China, and restoring regional balance. Let's get into the details. May 4th, 2025, 6:17 a.m. Sirens screamed across Tel Aviv, streets emptied, children were ripped from sleep, parents rushed to shelters. But it was already too late. A hypersonic missile, invisible to radar and traveling faster than Mach 5, slammed into the northern wing of Ben Gurion Airport. The explosion shattered glass miles away. Flights were grounded. The air reeked of burning metal. This wasn't just an attack, it was a declaration. For years, the Houthi militants had launched crude rockets across the region. But this was different. This was advanced, precise, devastating. A missile that had no business being in their hands. One that pierced the defenses of one of the most heavily guarded airspaces on Earth. Israel's A-3 and THAAD systems, built with American technology, never saw it coming. The questions began flooding in. How did it get through? Who provided the technology? Why now? But as intelligence scrambled for answers, one truth became undeniable. This wasn't the act of a militia. It was the move of a hidden hand, a calculated strike designed to humiliate, to provoke. And it succeeded. But in doing so, it crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Because at that very moment, across the ocean, a different kind of siren was sounding. One not of warning, but of response. The coordinates were already in the system. Engines were already warming. A message was forming, not in words, but in action. And for those who dared wake a sleeping giant, dawn was no longer a beginning. It was the start of judgment. As the smoke still rose from the airport wreckage, analysts across Washington, Tel Aviv, and NATO command centers stared at one burning question. Where did that missile come from? Not just the launch point, but its true origin. What they discovered was more than alarming. It was unprecedented. Initial analysis ruled out Iran's known missile models. The trajectory, speed, and radar signature didn't match anything previously launched from Yemen. It flew too fast, too silent, too precise. Then came the satellite imagery, frames captured just hours before impact, showing a small convoy arriving at the suspected launch zone near Sadr. What stood out wasn't the trucks. It was the unmarked UAVs hovering above them. Russian-made Orlan-10 drones, China's CGSL satellites, and encrypted Iranian signals. Individually, these details could be dismissed. Together, they told a terrifying story. This was no lone act of rebellion. It was a field test. The missile's body structure bore striking similarity, nearly 80% to Russia's 3M-22 Zircon hypersonic design. But it wasn't a copy. It was an evolution, refined, smarter, faster, with external satellite guidance and signal modulation systems tied to civilian-looking Chinese satellites. Overhead at the exact hour of launch, CGSL arrays were transmitting positioning data into northern Yemen, directly over the target area. And on the ground? Iran. The fingerprints of Tehran were everywhere. Munitions crates, encrypted field radios, and technicians embedded within Houthi units as so-called advisors. The same shipment routes previously flagged for small arms were now moving missile components, radar relays, and even mobile command units disguised as agricultural cargo. A triangle had formed in the shadows. Russia provided the architecture. China gave the eyes in the sky. Iran delivered the terrain and manpower. Together, they had armed a proxy force with a weapon capable of destabilizing the region in seconds. And what was worse, this triangle hadn't just handed over a missile. It had sent a message. We're watching, we're testing, and we're not hiding anymore. But they made one mistake. They tested it on America's closest ally, and now their shadows were being dragged into the light. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't call for debate. At exactly 7:45 a.m., less than 2 hours after the strike on Ben Gurion Airport, twin operations began unfolding in perfect sync. One from Negev Air Base in southern Israel, the other from undisclosed U.S. bases in the Gulf. Engines roared, hangar doors opened, pilots received the one line that changed everything. Launch authorization granted. And just like that, the sky responded. Israeli F-35I Adirs rose first. Stealthy, loaded, surgical. Minutes later, American F-A-18E Super Hornets followed, escorted by MQ-9 Reapers in high-altitude surveillance positions. Each aircraft locked into the shared Link 16 tactical data network, feeding real-time imagery and coordinates across command centers in Washington and Tel Aviv. It wasn't just a coordinated strike, it was a symphony of retaliation. Their first target? The launch site. Located near the rocky terrain north of Sada, it was camouflaged beneath dirt ramps and positioned beside a container disguised as a civilian utility structure. A nearby UAV runway, hidden as an olive grove, provided further proof. This wasn't just a battlefield, it was a factory for future threats. At 9:41 a.m., contact was made. An MQ-9 Reaper marked the target with laser designation. Within seconds, a U.S. Super Hornet dropped a GBU-39 SDB munition directly onto the launcher. The fireball was captured in real time by satellite. A second strike decapitated the radar tower. The third, fired by a brimstone-equipped Israeli F-35, reduced the ammo depot to ash. No warning, no escape. But the mission wasn't over. Israeli jets turned south, hitting signal jammers and command transmitters hidden in underground bunkers. With pinpoint accuracy, F-35s destroyed relay nodes using millimeter wave targeting, leaving Houthi radios across the region in silence. In just under 30 minutes, the core of the Houthi strike infrastructure had been turned to rubble. The sky wasn't defending anymore. It was hunting. And for every shadow that moved beneath it, there was no longer any doubt. This was the cost of crossing the line. If you've made it this far, don't stop now. The story is just beginning. Stick with us because the next chapter will shake you. As the last flames faded over the scorched launch site, Israeli intelligence delivered a second set of coordinates, this time far more critical. Hidden beneath the craggy hills east of Seda was the Al-Mawich complex, a labyrinthine command center burrowed into the earth. It wasn't just a bunker, it was a brain. Thermal imaging from American Reapers revealed faint heat signatures running through concrete-reinforced layers, 3 stories deep. According to intercepted communications, this was where senior Houthi field commanders had gathered following the airport strike, believing the subterranean depth would shield them. But no concrete was thick enough to withstand what was coming. 12:47 p.m. 2 Israeli F-35I Adirs, configured for low-altitude strike missions, dropped into the terrain. Their payload, GBU-28s, laser-guided, earth-penetrating munitions designed for one purpose: to kill what hides beneath. Each bomb weighed over 5,000 pounds, engineered to breach hardened facilities buried more than 30 feet underground. The first bomb hit the surface with surgical precision, piercing through layers of reinforced cement before detonating deep inside the central coordination room. Seismic sensors picked up the shockwave. It wasn't just structural, it was strategic. The second GBU-28 followed seconds later, slamming into the northern wing of the tunnel complex, right where radio frequencies had spiked earlier that morning. That section housed encrypted relay rooms and auxiliary command quarters. Within a breath, the signals stopped. But it was the third strike that sealed Al-Mawich's fate. Dropped into the fuel storage chamber located in the southern shaft, it ignited not just munitions, but volatile chemicals used to power generators and comms equipment. The detonation created a firestorm. Thermal imagery captured internal temperatures spiking to 1,500 degrees. Everything inside vaporized. By 12:55 p.m., the command center was gone. No orders, no transmissions, no survivors. Houthi field radios fell into absolute silence across all frequencies. Signal triangulation teams confirmed the heartbeat of the operation had been extinguished. But this wasn't just an airstrike, it was a decapitation. A strike designed not only to punish, but to dismantle, surgically, a network that thought it could hide beneath rock and arrogance. And as Israeli jets returned to base, one truth echoed louder than any explosion. Even the deepest tunnels cannot protect you from precision. At 1:03 p.m., the smoke over Al-Mawich hadn't yet settled, but the Reapers were already in position. Orbiting silently at 30,000 feet, two American MQ-9s began capturing real-time infrared scans of the mountain's surface. The bomb craters were still glowing white-hot, evidence of the GBU-28's devastating depth. But it wasn't the blast radius that confirmed success. It was the silence. Normally, even in post-strike chaos, faint comms traffic could be intercepted. Emergency calls, distressed relays, shortwave static. But over Al-Mawich, there was nothing. Drone-mounted sensors swept for heat signatures inside the ridge. The underground bunker had once emitted a lattice of activity. Human presence, machine-generated warmth, power grid pulses. Now those scans showed a vacuum, no residual heat from body clusters, no electrical hum from command terminals. Only darkness and collapse. One Reaper descended to 25,000 feet to scan the northern slope. Its synthetic aperture radar, capable of mapping subsurface anomalies, identified a distinct shift in terrain density, a sign of total internal cave-in. Where once tunnels branched in three directions, the returning echo revealed a single, jagged fault line. The rock had folded inward. The complex hadn't just been hit, it had imploded. In the southern section, plumes of black smoke were still venting from narrow crevices where the fuel depot once lay. Sensors detected concentrated chemical residue in the vapor, evidence of internal firestorms sustained beyond ignition, likely fed by diesel generators and radioisotope components stored for long-term use. From space, Israeli OFEC satellites cross-referenced the strike zone with previous 3D terrain data. A noticeable depression, almost 4 feet deep, had formed over the central impact site. The mountain had sunken. The bunker, buried and burned, was now entombed beneath its own ambition. But it wasn't just surveillance tech confirming the kill. Across the region, signals told the same story. Houthi field units that once relayed coordinates from Al-Mawich now sat blind, leaderless, and deaf. Attempted uplinks to command returned with dead air. Relay drones circling above Sada switched to contingency frequencies, none of which responded. At 1:12 p.m., confirmation was relayed to Joint Command. The final report was brief, chilling, and exact. Structure collapsed. No thermal activity. No signal. Target eliminated. And while no headline would carry the name Al-Mawich, military analysts understood what had just happened. Not a bunker, not a hideout, but a central nervous system had just been cut from the body. There would be no recovery, no rebuilding, no second strike, only silence. And the Reapers, watching from above, ensuring it stayed that way. As the last embers of Al-Mawich faded into the hills, satellites turned their gaze to the sea. For weeks, intelligence agencies had tracked suspicious cargo ships departing from Bandar Abbas and Bushehr, major Iranian ports. By day, they appeared civilian, rusted hulls, forged manifests listing construction equipment. But by night, their purpose changed. Moving slowly along the Red Sea, these vessels approached the Yemeni coastline under radio silence, avoiding commercial shipping lanes. And then they disappeared, only to offload their cargo onto small Houthi boats in open water. That night, the cover was blown. At 2:02 a.m., an American MQ-9 Reaper locked eyes on a fast-moving skiff departing from one of the vessels. It carried no navigation lights, no radar signal. But heat imaging showed a dense metallic payload, missile canisters, antenna modules, and UAV spare kits packed beneath tarps. Simultaneously, two Israeli F-35I jets roared over the Red Sea, operating in total radio silence. They received live coordinates from the Reaper and descended without warning. In seconds, the first precision strike lit up the ocean. The skiff erupted, its cargo detonating mid-transfer. A second boat tried to flee but was incinerated before it could reach shore. The Iranian mothership attempted evasive maneuvers, but it was too late. A brimstone missile tore through the bow, igniting the fuel tanks. Within minutes, the vessel was engulfed in flames. Flashes lit the night sky like lightning over black water. The Red Sea, for a moment, became a theater of fire. By dawn, satellite images showed floating debris, oil slicks, and no trace of the cargo. The message was unmistakable. You can smuggle in the dark, but the sky sees everything. By the 6th hour of the operation, the landscape above Yemen no longer belonged to the Houthis. It belonged to surveillance, coordination, and firepower. But the job wasn't finished. Not yet. What came next wasn't about sending a message. It was about ending capability. At 1:22 p.m., a final directive was issued from the Joint Command. Strike Package Delta 7. Full destruction authorized. The targets, all remaining radar towers, underground communication cables, and known escape routes embedded along the mountain slopes surrounding Sada. The operation began with altitude. US FA-18E Super Hornets launched in formation, followed by the bone-rattling presence of a B-1B Lancer heavy bomber. Accompanying them were Reapers and Sentinel surveillance units feeding real-time telemetry into the strike net. These weren't isolated hits. They were synchronized shutdowns. First wave, Hilltop radars. A GBU-53B Stormbreaker smart bomb screamed toward the first array, detonating just feet from its signal spine. The second tower was decapitated seconds later. Within moments, the Houthis' last eyes on the sky went dark. Second wave, underground signal nodes. Targeting data revealed cable relays woven through the base of the ridge, points once used to transmit secure comms to command bunkers. The munitions, GBU-57AB, massive ordnance penetrators. Their impact didn't just crush steel conduits, it shattered the rock housing them. The ground itself collapsed inward. Final wave, escape tunnels. Intel had identified a cluster of emergency shafts used by field commanders, routes meant to guarantee survival, but they were too predictable. A pair of JDAM-guided bombs closed them off like sealing a tomb. Thermal scans confirmed what ground teams suspected. No movement, no heat, no way out. The region was now more than crippled. It was paralyzed. No radar, no radio, no retreat. By 1:47 p.m., Central Command confirmed. Target grid neutralized, area silenced, escape vectors eliminated. In the span of minutes, the Houthis lost what had taken them years to build. And for the first time since the missile strike at Ben Gurion, the battlefield went quiet. Not in peace, but in complete engineered silence. By 2:05 p.m., the battlefield wasn't just silent, it was broken. The radar sites were gone. Communications reduced to static. Escape routes sealed beneath layers of rock and flame. But perhaps the most telling shift came not from explosions, but from gestures. From the sky, Reaper drones began to detect movement. Scattered clusters of militants, not in attack formation, but in disarray. Some groups waved fabric, shirts, scarves, even bandages, fashioned into makeshift white flags. They emerged from rocks, collapsed tunnel mouths, even abandoned vehicles. The Houthis were surrendering. Thermal scans showed them unarmed, hands above heads. Some knelt. Others walked slowly toward roads with no transport, only the dust left behind by the jets that destroyed their world. In one instance, a 5-man cell used stones to write a crude message visible to drones. No commander, no orders, we surrender. Intercepted shortwave transmissions painted an equally desperate picture. We've lost signal. Headquarters is gone. There's no answer on fallback lines. Do not shoot. We have wounded. For a force once emboldened by foreign support and underground protection, the psychological collapse was swift. Without direction, without weapons, without hope, they weren't fighters anymore. They were survivors. And then came the ultimate reversal. At 2:31 p.m., one intercepted frequency revealed that a surrendered group had voluntarily transmitted coordinates of a secondary command post deep in the Western Highlands. An act of betrayal driven by fear, exhaustion, or both. Within Joint Command, analysts confirmed what was already visually clear. The Houthi network hadn't just fallen, it had turned on itself. But this wasn't mercy. No safe zone had been declared. No white trucks rolled in with food or supplies. The Reapers didn't open fire, but they didn't look away either. They simply watched and recorded. This was no longer a war of position. It was a reckoning. And those who had once screamed defiance now whispered surrender, praying their signal would be heard by something, anything, before the sky changed its mind. As surrender swept the battlefield, The real hunt began. With the physical infrastructure destroyed and the command chain collapsed, American and Israeli intelligence turned their focus to something far more elusive: the invisible hands behind the missile. This was no ordinary Houthi weapon. Its velocity, radar profile, and control systems pointed to a chilling truth. Someone had given them access to next-generation warfare. NSA decryption teams pored over captured communication bursts intercepted before the strike. Embedded in the metadata were digital fingerprints, code fragments in Russian, signal structures used in Chinese military satellite arrays, and encrypted telemetry protocols previously linked to Iran's aerospace programs. At 3:12 p.m., a breakthrough. A microburst transmission from northern Sada matched a known signature used by the CGSL satellite constellation, a Chinese network officially labeled civilian, but long suspected of dual-use operations. Cross-referenced with satellite timestamps, the data revealed active CGSL targeting streams over the missile site minutes before launch. But the deeper cut came next. Stored inside a recovered drone memory core, analysts discovered executable code for a flight correction algorithm, a critical subroutine found only in a rare Russian hypersonic development program once leaked through a compromised lab in Kaluga. Someone had accessed that code, and someone had handed it to the Houthis. Behind every explosion there had been a server, behind every strike a signal, and now those signals were being mapped, decrypted, and traced, one line of code at a time. The battlefield may have gone quiet, but a second war had just begun. One fought in data vaults, behind firewalls, and beneath the digital fog of proxy conflict. Because if this missile was a warning, its authors were still out there. The missiles may have stopped, but the mission was far from over. Within hours, new satellite grids were activated. Permanent radar bases were proposed along Yemen's western corridor. Maritime surveillance lines in the Red Sea expanded. Cyber units were mobilized, not just to respond, but to anticipate. Because this wasn't just a counterattack, it was a restructuring of power. America and its allies were no longer reacting, they were reshaping. The message was unmistakable: there will be no sanctuary for proxy wars, no shadows to hide in, no second chances for those who test the resolve of a unified force. The Middle East had just witnessed not only the cost of provocation, but the emergence of a new doctrine. Strike once, and the balance resets. Strike again, and the map gets redrawn. And this time, the redraw was already underway. Where in the world are you watching this from? Let us know in the comments below. Stay tuned, we are just getting started.